Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's Genius Material webinar. This week we're going to have a look at some of the things that we can do, better habits, to help the revision and exam process along. It's about developing a strategy, a way of doing things, to give yourself every chance of success. We'll look at revisiting information you've already learned and how to do that. We'll look at chunking and why you should do that. Testing yourself, why and how you should do that too. We'll talk about what it means to pay attention. We'll talk about the power of association and hanging information, new information, onto stuff you already know and understand. We'll talk about what questions to ask before turning up for the exam. And of course, we'll have a quick recap of the 3 keys to learning. Here are some things, believe it or not, that some people do. Cramming the night before an exam, or waiting to the last minute to start revising. Now, I reckon the reason people in the past have done that is because, of course, you now know that we forget 80% of what we've learnt, most of it overnight, but up to 80% within 2 weeks. So, of course, when people have not had a better strategy, of course they've been obliged to cram at the last minute and hope that it's still in their head when they take the exam. It's an awfully stressful way of carrying on, but of course it's not surprising that people have done that in the past if they haven't got a better way of doing things. Some people try to revise while they've got something else going on, a TV playing in the background which distracts them, or listening to loud music. Now, for some people, and you'll know if you're one of them because of the eBook that you had generated from your questionnaire, which was profiling you for your preferred learning style, some people actually could do quite well if they were listening to quiet and relaxing music in the background. You know, the sort of thing that you might get in a massage salon. You know, the sort of ambient music that doesn't really go anywhere, hasn't got a melody, hasn't got a neat harmonic structure. Some people, that helps to get them into the relaxed state that's ideal for learning, relaxed and focused. But we're certainly not talking about heavy metal, thrash music, punk, or anything with lyrics. Anything with a strong rhythm or structure to it that your brain can't help but to pay attention to. So look out for multitasking, for having all those distractions around. Now, some people lose perspective. They get bogged down in minor detail rather than focusing on the key points. Now, I think it's a really good idea for you to develop the strategy of first of all looking at the big picture, the whole content of what you've got to learn for the exam. So for example, you'd be looking in the index perhaps to see how many chapters you've got. You get to see what the titles of the chapters are, so you've got an overview of the whole thing. Then maybe you'd go to chapter 1 if that's where you are, and you'd see what chapter 1 is all about. Then you'd see what the subsections in chapter 1 are all about. And then you'd begin to look at the nitty-gritty, the detail. Some people lose perspective and they get stuck into one tiny little bit, and they're not really paying enough attention to the rest of what they need to know for the exam. So losing perspective can be a problem for some people. And finally, some people just simply do not adequately prepare themselves for the type of exam or the format of the specific exam they're revising for. I know that some of your exams are multiple choice, or as a friend of mine calls them, multiple guess. And I do know that some of those exams actually are quite tough because you haven't just got to get some answers right, you've got to get all the answers right within one question. So for example, if there are 5 options and you've got to choose 3, it's no good just choosing 2 and picking up a couple of points where you might have had 3. If you don't get all 3, you don't get the point at all for the question, no points at all. Or if you get 2 of them right and then you've selected the wrong one, again, you don't get any points for that question. They're really quite tough. So you would need to know, going into that exam, you would have to know exactly what you were up against. Just imagine if you came out of that exam having not really understood what you were supposed to be doing. And despite all that work that you'd put in advance, you ended up with no points. That's just from the point of view of just not really being properly prepared for that particular exam. So I'm sure I don't need to point out how these sorts of things could be undermining your otherwise valiant efforts, because I know it's hard work, this revision. You don't get to do this stuff without putting some elbow grease in there, and I don't want you to be wasting your time or undermining your efforts. What about procrastination then? What's with that? Again, I suppose it's a survival strategy. It's an attempt to avoid the thing that's really worrying you the most and pretending it's not there. Now, that's so opposite to my approach to life that I find that very difficult to understand how somebody could just pretend that something's not there, until I realise that we've all got different strategies for surviving life. And the things that I do aren't always the most constructive. They might be different from this particular one, but it's not always the most constructive thing that we find ourselves doing, because our brain is acting automatically from the lessons we've learned in the past, the experiences we've had, the sort of way that it filters the information that's coming in. And people who procrastinate are just simply trying to survive life like the rest of us. And sometimes you'll hear them making sorts of excuses like, "Oh, I'm so busy at work, I just don't have the time to revise." Some people, knowing full well they don't have a good revision strategy, and knowing that they learn almost as much as they forget almost as much as they learn, they'll even use the excuse that there's hardly any point in starting too soon, because they'll have forgotten it by the time the exam comes round. Have you ever heard yourself thinking those things or saying them out loud, or have you come across somebody else who'll come up with some plausible reason like that? You know, we can try to fool ourselves with these excuses, but deep down we really know that that's what they are. They're excuses, aren't they? We're trying to rationalise our laziness, our unwillingness to face the enemy head on. So stop with the excuses, because it's not going to get you where you need to be. And all I'm interested in is getting you to where you need to be in the quickest and easiest way possible, and having you enjoy the process and feel good about yourself and about what you're achieving. So no more excuses. They make you feel bad. Don't go back to doing what you were doing before either. Now you know about Genius Material. You know that what you were doing doesn't work. And you know that there are other options now. So now look for the other things that will work. Don't do what doesn't work. Do something else. Now that you're on the Genius Material system, of course, you're getting great quality information about exactly what to do. I can be sure that in the past, before Genius Material, you weren't using the online, any sort of calendar like the online revision calendar, because I know that I'm the one who invented it. And there was nothing else like it in the world that existed before, and as far as I can work out, there's nothing that exists like it now. It's world-breaking stuff, and if you use it, it's going to make a massive difference to your results. You probably already know that we did some really heavy testing on all of this system well over a year ago now. For 4 months we had a pilot group who used the Genius Material system, and all the ones who used the system, they all passed their exams. I'm sure you know this already. And they passed them comfortably. 92% of them, 92% of them got 70% and more in their exams. 42% of them, that's getting up for half, isn't it? 42% of them got 80% or more in their exams. So, keep following my advice. If it works for other people, there's no reason why it wouldn't work for you as well. Oh, and remember, if you're really struggling with something, if you can't fathom out why it won't stay in your head, or you just want a fresh perspective, do what someone did yesterday. Send me a scan of your notes and tell me what the challenge is. Send me the section from the course manual, the source material. Send me the notes that you've been making. Tell me what the problem is, what you've worked out for yourself, where the issue is, and I'll do my level best to help you find a way to press forward. That's my job. That's what I want to do to help you. So I want to help you with your current situation so that you can build up your arsenal of techniques so that you can pick and choose the right one for the right revision in the future. Speed everything up. So adopting a good strategy is essential if you don't want to shoot yourself in the metaphorical foot. It's essential not to leave things to the last minute, but instead get on top of it weeks, preferably months in advance of the exam, while it's all still manageable. It's important to revise in short bursts, because that's the way your brain likes to handle information. So revise often and spread out your revision sessions across your timetable. You need to be organised. You need to plan your revision time in advance. You know that things you intend to get round to doing sometimes don't get done. But if you timetable them in, if you put them in your calendar, somehow those things just get done at the time you say they're going to get done. So schedule in the times that you expect to put aside to do some revision, and also make the most of any unexpected opportunities. For example, if somebody's late for a meeting, or if you find yourself sitting on a bus or a train, take something with you at all times. So if you do find yourself with a spare 10 minutes, 20 minutes, then you've got something you can do that's constructive, which make you feel really great about the progress you're making. Now, we're talking about when you do organise a section, a bunch of time to do some revision, it can be as little as 20 minutes. 30 minutes, 40 minutes is great. You don't want to be trying to revise non-stop for a whole day, a weekend, a week. I know it's difficult to take time off work to do that. You don't want to be spending the whole weekend doing that. Now, if you've got a lot of revision to do and you do have to spend the weekend doing it, make sure that the bursts of time are short bursts of time. So in the same way that this webinar is about 30 minutes long, I expect you to get up and go and do something else immediately afterwards. You need to manage your time like that because your brain already processes information beautifully in short bursts of time. So work with your brain the way that it's already doing things in a great way. Now, of course, you also have to test yourself. That will tell you how you're doing. It serves two purposes. First of all, you can monitor whether what you're doing is working or not, and maybe change the way you do your notes if necessary. You're learning this process. You're learning how to do it best for you. Also, as you develop your revision system and you hone your style to your learning type and you get quicker and more effective, as you test yourself and you realise that you are consistently now remembering everything you intend to, you'll feel good. You'll feel good about the whole thing. You'll feel good about yourself. You'll feel good about the process. It'll feel all right that you're taking these exams. It's encouraging. We human beings love to know that we can create our desired outcome. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel purposeful and fulfilled. We need those things. As soon as you've booked yourself in for an exam, that's the time to start studying for it. You probably would be very surprised by the number of people I've spoken to who have booked an exam for 2 months away, but don't intend to start revising for another 4 weeks. Ooh. Even if all you had to do was revise, I mean by that you haven't got any employment, you've got no families to take care of, no relationships making demands on your time. If all you had to do with your day was revise, I would still counsel against cramming it into that 1 month if you've got the option of spreading it over 2. From the point of view of how your brain does all of this the best, from the point of view of what's likely to work most reliably, easily, comfortably, you should be doing short chunks of revision regularly and not leaving it all until you've only got a few weeks left. And, when you've got those last few weeks, you've still got other things to fit in around it. So get started at the first opportunity. Predominantly, we learn new things by coming back to them again and again. Maybe in new contexts. Maybe in a more advanced way each time, adding to our knowledge and our understanding. Perhaps not. Maybe it's just literally the same thing that comes back every time. And very often people underestimate how important it is to keep returning to the information that you've already learnt in order to keep it in your head. And like this carousel here, going round and round, coming back to the same point with each revolution, we need to keep coming back to the work we've revised. Now you've read your ebook and maybe watched some of the training videos, not to mention attended these webinars, you'll know about the learning cycle. You'll know how important it is to return to the information that you've learnt the day after you've learnt it, after you've slept on it, then a week later, and then monthly until the exam. And each time you do, you'll reinforce that learning and make the connections in your brain stronger so that information becomes second nature to you. That's what we need. I've had conversations with umpteen people who've done some revision, but not enough. They hadn't planned in the revisiting they had to do, the testing. So each session they sat down to revise, they learnt something new. But true to what we've now come to expect, they'd forgotten the vast majority of what they'd learnt in the past, and quite quickly, of course. So lots of people have complained to me that despite doing some revision, they failed their exam by just a few %, and in some cases 3, 4, 5 times over. I'm surprised at how many people have told me they've taken the same exam 5 times. Several people have told me that. Same exam 5 times. And they'll say, but I've only failed it by a few %. But of course, that's all it takes to have to do the same thing over and over. And of course they're doing the same thing over and over because what's happening is as fast as they're learning stuff, they're forgetting the old stuff because they don't know about revisiting. So you really need to take very seriously the knowledge that we have now, that human beings need to go back over what we've learnt time and time again. But you don't have to do it every day. Pay attention to the learning cycle and the whole thing becomes quite manageable, especially if you're using the online revision calendar. I don't know how the heck you're going to organise that unless you use that bit of software. So I guess part of the problem with the exams that you're facing is that many of you feel that you know the information already because it's what you're using every day in advising your clients. Your unconscious, the automatic part of your brain, will do its level best to have you feel comfortable. So it will fool you into thinking you don't need to revise because you already know the content of your course manuals. Of course you do. And let's face it, you probably do know the vast majority of what's in there. But it would seem that resting on your laurels like that isn't getting most people through the exams. Just let's look at what's actually happening. It seems that in most cases it's not enough to know what you already know. You need to know that information the way that it's presented in the course manual to be able to present it the way that the examiner needs you to present it. In a way, it's easier for me. When I open your course manuals, I don't recognise any of it. It's not a subject that I know much about at all. If I had to take your exam, it would be really clear to me that I had to knuckle down and really apply myself. So, starting with nothing, I know that I would have to do a heck of a lot of work to learn everything in your course manual. So it makes it easier for me to judge how much work I have to do, and the answer is a lot. And the thing is, you probably need to do a lot as well. But the good news is that as you go through your course manual with a fine-tooth comb, I suspect that most of it you will already know. The good news is the bits of information that you do have to learn, you can associate with and hang on to the stuff that you already understand. You're already halfway there. You do have to do some work to learn the new stuff, but at least you're familiar with the whole subject area. And that's what we do, naturally as human beings. New information makes far more sense to us when we can relate it to something that we've already got, we're already using, we already understand. So when you're learning new stuff, look out for how it relates to stuff that you already know. You can think of it as layers of understanding, layers of familiarity, and consequently increasing your strength of recall. But just like the picture of this cake here, as you organise your revision and bite off the small chunks to revise, it's important to understand where each chunk fits into the bigger scheme of things. It's no good understanding just an isolated bit of information. You've got to know what it's all about, what it applies to, where it fits in. You need to understand how the information relates to other information, so you build up the bigger picture and make sense of it all. And as you already know, the more something makes sense to you, the easier it is to understand and remember. Any time that you have that, the aha moment, boom, suddenly something makes sense, you get it, you understand it, you're probably going to remember it. So that's why I suggest when you go to your course manual for the first time, you pay attention to the index at the beginning, which has already got set out for you the broad sections, the large chunks. It's also why I suggest that on every page of notes that you make, you catalogue it according to which section of the course manual it's come from. So as you learn, you're automatically understanding where it fits into the larger scheme of things. And if you look at the index, of course, most of that work's been done for you, that the broader picture, the larger skeleton there. And anything can be learnt if it's divided up into small enough chunks. I expect at school you were asked to learn some lines from a play or a poem. And I expect what you had to do is what I had to do. Learn the first line over and over and over and over. When I got the first line, move on to the second line. Learn that over and over and over and over till I got that, and then put the two lines together. Make sure I knew them thoroughly, then move on to the third line. And of course what you're doing there is naturally chunking it up. So subdivide the chunks laid out for you in the table of contents in your course manual and keep subdividing and subdividing until you end up with chunks of 7 or fewer bits of information. It's all there for you in your ebook. You know about this. It's there in your ebook and the training videos. And you know from your ebook and the training videos and previous webinars that I suggest you create your own question to test yourself for each chunk of revision that you've done. Remember, each chunk should be 7 points or fewer. The test question should be on the other side of the sheet to the revision notes you've made. Because another mistake people make is to look at their notes first and then turn them over to see if they can remember them, and all they're doing then is testing their short-term memory. That's no good when you get to the exam. So if you do it my way, you'll store your revision notes in a loose ring binder, notes side down, questions side up. So when you're reminded by the online revision calendar to revisit a chunk, you go straight to it in your ring binder because you've catalogued it and you know where to find it therefore. You see your test question, you answer it, and only then turn it over to check you've remembered everything you intended to, because now you're looking at the notes on the other side. And when it comes to answering the question, close your eyes and see if you can still see in your mind's eye the notes that you created. Say the answer out loud and draw the answer in pictures or words in the air. Act it out too, if any of it lends itself to a mini performance like this one. Why do I suggest that? Well, it's not to get you a bunch of funny looks from anybody watching, although of course that might happen depending on where you are. It's because you'll be using more of your brain. And that means that no matter how small a part that you first recall in the exam, it's going to tend to trigger all the other parts that you intended to remember, because that's the way the brain works. You know, you're creating all these connections in your brain. Whatever comes to you first, boom, 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 all the other bits of information are likely to sail forward because you've been using far more of your brain by seeing in your mind's eye, speaking out loud and hearing the words you're saying out loud, of course, and drawing and moving, either by drawing the words and pictures in the air or by acting it out, moving. Of course, dressing up to act it all out is totally optional, not something that I necessarily recommend. But if that's what does it for you, then that's great. To learn anything, we have to pay attention. When learning something, when we're revising, we have to pay good quality, focused, deliberate and determined attention. Don't fool yourself that you can revise when there are distractions going on. That's what we were saying earlier, isn't it? Remember, your unconscious mind wants you to feel comfortable. So watching telly or getting distracted by the kids is a lot more fun than working hard on your revision. And I appreciate that some people resent having to do the exams in the first place. So don't split your attention. Make sure you set yourself up just to do the revision. Get it done. Don't give your unconscious mind an easier alternative. On the contrary, Focus on what's important about doing well in your exam. Think about what you'll be able to do as a consequence of passing it comfortably. And maybe just spend a few seconds before you sit down to do your revision. Think about why you're doing it, what it's going to get you. And even though revising might occur to you like hard work, and it does get easier and more fun as you get the hang of it. And it feels good when you start making a difference. So start getting on top of it, and that will give you the motivation to continue. The whole thing will snowball. Remember that carousel I showed you earlier? You increase the chances of remembering some new information when you can attach it and link it to information you already have at your fingertips. In other words, when you come round again with new information that you can attach to old information. In other words, you really need to find associations between the new stuff and the old stuff. This increases the relevance, of course, and the context and the meaning. That's one of the reasons why, as you get into the swing of it, learning gets easier and easier. It's because you're building up each time on top of the information you already have. It's cumulative. Most of us enjoy a good mystery, but you don't want to go into the exam not knowing what to expect. I mentioned my friend who described one of his exams as multiple guess. I wouldn't be surprised if sometimes you've used the same expression, but it doesn't fill us with confidence telling ourselves this. All we've got to do is guess, and that's all we've got to help us. Why not take as much guesswork out of it as you possibly can by doing a bit of research about the exam where you can? Find out as much as you can. Ask questions. Ask course providers what's going to happen. Ask people who have already sat the exam. If you go to a seminar, ask there too. Look for any pamphlets or explanations of the exam, or maybe something on a website somewhere. But perhaps start with your course manual or your exam application. Get some old exam papers that you can practice with. That's going to give you a good idea. But make sure they're still relevant. Make sure nothing's changed. Just look around you for any clues to minimise the surprises, especially the nasty ones, and prepare yourself as far as you're able. As you know, every week I deliver a webinar to help you revise even more efficiently. They're recorded, so you can catch up whenever it's convenient. Typically, I'll explain a memory technique or the keys to learning or how to use the revision tools in the Genius Materials system. I work hard to make sure that everything I give you is useful to you, because the way you make your notes will make the difference between making the information easy to remember and making it nigh on impossible to remember. So look at the different ways that you can make your notes. I've gone through some of them in the webinars. Some are more elaborate than others. Some take longer to make than others. There are no prizes for making the best notes, but there's plenty to be gained by making the right sort of notes for you. Pay attention to keywords, the rule of 7, patterns, and relationships between different bits of information. You only need to go to town on your notes if what you're already doing isn't having you remember enough when you come to test yourself. Also bear in mind though, that if you're not remembering everything you intend to, it could be because, now here come the keys to learning of course, you haven't spent enough time with the information in the first place for your brain to make a pattern of it and send it to your long-term memory. That's key to learning number 1. It could be a combination of that, and or you're not making the right sort of notes for you. That's key to learning number 2, isn't it? So start off with knowing that there's going to be a little trial and error. So follow my instructions as best you can and calibrate. Every time you test yourself, what you're looking for is recall of everything on the other side of your paper, the revision notes. If you don't remember everything on the other side, then you haven't got the hang of it yet. Don't fool yourself. Spend a bit longer with the information, therefore. Look at how you've drawn your notes, so that spending longer with the information is key number 1. Look at how you've drawn your notes, that's key to learning number 2. Have you really paid attention to those 2 keys? You might have to rewrite the notes if necessary, or at least highlight the bits that you forgot, to draw pictures, to draw your brain's attention to them in some way. And if you've had to do this because you failed your revisiting test, remember to set the sequence again. Now we're talking about key number 3. If you got into the swing of it and you've been testing yourself, but today you don't remember everything that you attended to for that particular chunk, today becomes day one, because now you've got to spend longer with it, maybe change your notes, and today becomes day one of the sequence. So it might be that you're 1 week or 1 month down the line in the learning circle. Tough. You need to start that cycle all over again today. So today becomes day one, and you've got to test yourself within 24 hours, preferably after you've slept on it. If you don't, you're fooling yourself. It's as simple as that. Sounds a bit harsh and a bit picky, doesn't it? But that's what you have to do if you want to remember everything. It's as simple as that. So here we go, recapping the 3 keys to learning. Ignore these at your peril. 1, you need to spend enough time with the information in the first place for your brain to make a pattern of it and send it to your long-term memory. 2, the notes you make have to be in a form that suit your style of learning. A lot of what we talk about suits all human beings. After all, we have a lot in common. And then there's some variations. So make sure you know where your strengths are. How will you know? Because of your eBook. The pages towards the back have got a letter in the top corner of each page. And there's more about this in the training video number 5. But all of us would do well to develop our visual skills, because the more you can use them in your revision, the faster it will be. Are you using the online revision calendar? If not, why not? You have to keep on top of each separate revision chunk according to the learning cycle. If you don't, you're setting yourself up to forget 80% of what you've learnt within 2 weeks. Keeping tabs on the chunks you've learnt in any way other than using the automatic system I've got for you becomes very unwieldy and untenable in next to no time. It's not like, there are such things as revision calendars available, but it's not like those. This is groundbreaking technology. You need to watch the training video, I think it's number 2, isn't it, to understand what it will do for you and see how to use it. And you'll find it here under the training tab with the other training videos. Please make sure that if you haven't already done so, your priority is to watch the training video number 2 and use the calendar. It really is easy to get the hang of, and it will remind you of what to test yourself on and when, so it'll take the headache out of the revision process. So all you need to concentrate then on is just getting the information into your head. You don't have to use a complicated system then to keep tabs on your revision cycle, because people who try to use their own systems invariably find them so unwieldy and spend so much time on the admin organising their revision that they end up not doing it. And then, of course, invariably they go back to forgetting 80% of what they've learnt within 2 weeks. So as fast as they're learning stuff, they're forgetting stuff. Don't be one of those people. Now you've got access to this automated system. You know, if you're calibrating how well you're doing your revision each time you test yourself on a chunk according to the learning cycle, then it would be great if I could get some feedback from you. If you found this useful, let me know. You don't have to bring an apple for the teacher, but it's good for me to know what you want more of and what you want less of and what you need help with. That way you'll get what you need, and you'll help me to continue to design the programme to be the best it can be. That's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Back to the normal time next week. Have a happy and productive week. Goodbye.